Okay. Yeah, we can get started.
These come in.
7 o'clock. Hey, folks. So this is my first one of these on the Zoom open sessions. But I guess if you want to get started, I'll just go off of the list and who I see on here. Have you attended another one in the past, Tim?
I think the other one was face to face. So
this is the first Zoom one.
yeah,
Oh, how do we get lucky?
yeah, highest level. I think one. Thanks for coming. Welcome. I think part of the purpose was just something less formal than the traditional school committee meeting. We don't have quorum. It allows for a little more conversation. I know some of you signed up through the sign up link. My thought would be, almost just as you can, the order you came into the Zoom might be a great way to start.
Well, that's so different for everybody. So
yeah, no, but if you know,
how about if I just start? I'll just go. Yeah, I'll start on my screen, and for people who are here too. Like, I guess they could bring up the subject matter because there's a lot of different subjects here. I think some of them were related, so I think I'd like to keep. I see 2 people for the public comment. Well, I guess not. No, one was public comment, one was policy and budget. Oh, yeah, there was another one for public and comment. So I don't see either one of those folks there. So, all right. So I'll just start with Kaylin, I guess, because she's in the top area over there.
Hi. Am I just saying my name and address?
I guess so. It's recorded. So I guess, yeah.
Okay. Caitlin Caskey, 5 Delaware Road. I submitted my question. I don't remember exactly how I worded it, just regarding, the recent events with the books.
Why don't you just restate, because a lot of I don't think the form is public, officially public. So for everyone who's listening, because this is supposed to be a conversation and other people can chime in. It's not like calling on people. This is supposed to be an open conversation. So
well, it was just a specific question. However, you wanted to, handle the questions that were submitted on the Google form, just regarding the policy and procedure.
Just go ahead and ask it. Yeah, just go ahead and ask the question about so that everyone understands, because that's what this is. Because other people on here might have some conversation or opinion about it.
Yeah, just with the oversight of the policy and procedure on how those books were obtained in the first place. I know Christine made it very clear, she thought it was very eye-opening for things that, I's needed to be dotted, T's needed to be crossed. Just wanted to see how the school committee would suggest to make sure these policies, specifically the IAJE that was cited, would be, I guess, just really overseen to make sure that, who's going to enforce these policies, to make sure administration isn't, that they're really following what they're supposed to be doing and obtaining any type of literature for school.
Are you talking about like a curriculum review or a content review process of some kind? That the policy outlines the idea of what it could be like in the schools, but the execution of that happens in numerous ways, within schools. So is there a specific part of it?
Well, I guess I'd have to go back to my notes, but so specifically IAJE was
I'm trying to get your question into one block. I can read it if you want.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think Right. I think there's 2 sides, what's in there today and then what might be procured or brought in the future. And the way I read your question was a little more towards looking forward. There is always, what do you review? But I'm asking, is that what you were alluding to?
Exactly. So the policy that was cited, IJAE, that was specifically referenced with the reconsideration committee, it obviously just wasn't very thorough. The way it was written up, my specific question was that materials shall be subjected to a test of literary merit and reality and context using the criteria established. My question was, what was the criteria that was established to make these decisions. I know that there is a draft that specifically lays out this criteria that isn't officially published yet. I think that according to Christine, that's something that's going to come out in the next week or so, hopefully. So my question is, moving forward, since policy is a very large part of school committee, how my school committee members suggest or recommend that these policies are adhered to.
So I guess what we could say is that all the policies today require, the execution of, there's the policy that kind of scaffolds the practice, right? And so, how do we, the idea of who would be responsible, again, that goes down the food chain, right? It starts at the school committee, goes down to the superintendent, and then all the way down. It's about putting things into practice, right? The idea of content, I don't think any content today is ordered willy-nilly. So adding a policy, what would you like to see in a policy as somebody entrusting, the school committee acts a policy, but as school committee members, we're not walking into the school and questioning teachers and department heads, right? That's not our role. So
Right.
what would you like what would you think, how would what, in a very, not like in depth, but what kind of feature of the process do you think is missing or was missing out of that the policy could cover, I guess, is that question.
Well, according to the policy write-up that was, I
Mhm.
guess, at the present time of 2021, 2022, it was very vague. It didn't list the criteria. It was specifically under the profanity and obscenities. Again, everyone can agree. I think this, these books kind of like caught everyone off guard. Like, wait a second, like some of the stuff in there, we can all agree that we need to adhere to all students in the community and in the community, LGBTQ, all over the place. But the issue was, at least for me personally, and I think a lot of parents who spoke out, was the sexual content in it. So how, again, like the existing policy was so vague on how you decipher what's too obscene and what's too, like, how bad profanities are, to be like, hey, maybe this isn't appropriate, hence why we had to go through this process, this reconsideration process, So again, nobody wants to go through something like that again to question. And my issue is and was how it was obtained in the first place and how we can avoid this happening in the future. So how are we going to hold our administration, anyone, and this isn't just the library, this is all over, this is in history and English,
Well, I was
everywhere.
trying to say, it goes way beyond the library.
Of course. Yeah. So I guess just how are we making sure that these policies are adhered to? Is it the school, principal? I think now with the newest policies and procedures, they are going to have to kind of go down a chain of people, which hopefully that, does happen. And it's not just on one department head and one person. So again, just kind of like hearing from you what you would recommend to make sure these policies are adhered to.
I guess I'm still fuzzy on what I would recommend about doing, as opposed to, I would think that one of my personal items around curriculum is the process of which it's curated in the first place, right? The curation, the organization, and the consistent review of it, by the teams themselves, and then dissemination out, right? So one of my personal frustrations that of being here in Medfield has the lack of ability for me to know what's happening, not every day, like in my kids' classrooms, but what are the big ideas that we're going over in certain periods of the year? And, what are the big idea in history, right? In every grade level, K up through 8, it kind of builds each year. Kindergarten, this is me in my classroom, and I'm part of this group, I'm part of my community, and then it grows as me and my town, me and my state, and where I place in that, and it grows year over year up to fifth grade, up to sixth, seventh, and eighth grade. Now I know that through the state standards thing, and I'm an educator, so I know those things. But as a common parent, most people may not, right? And so
Mhm.
how you and this is, and each teacher does it differently, and my reasoning for this is around the idea of being able to support learning from home. And so, and in that process, generally, we have, one of the upsides of having all of our grades across town in one school is that all the grades are together and can collaborate together. So if we were neighborhood schools, one things that can happen from time to time is one grade will go, one grade level in one school will go in one way, and one grade level in another school will go another, right? In a different way, like different manner. And not all the time, right? I'm talking lower grades, so it's not a huge impact. But we do have the benefit of having them all in one school. So they do collaborate together. So I'm sure that there's a lot of equitable distribution, and there's different and similar materials and experiences happening. Obviously, every teacher is different, but the content being used is probably alike or pretty close. With each teacher's got their own nuances, and if they're doing a great job, then they're reaching out to your student in a different way, and may have a different type of content that they have, or different content in a different format that responds better with your child, because maybe they're a visual learner, or maybe they're an auditory learner. And every teacher does that by trade. As you get up into the areas where the content gets a little more complex, and the complexities of some of the concepts, particularly around human concepts, and your relation to the books, which I think is obviously a big social, emotional, and could be obviously more on the extreme side, because there's maybe less eyeballs. It's not part of the curriculum. It's part of the open reading spot, or expanding special interests or personal interests. That's a little more subjective, and I would imagine that under the light of the current state, that there definitely was some light turned on to that particular subject area, or that particular process. The two books in question, are in high school libraries across this state, and particularly the ones that we consider our peers. I mean, every single one of them we consider our peers, and you can go look; they're all their catalogs are all public, all the high school catalogs. And so those particular two books, I purposely went around and looked. Um, and I used to run the library department at Newton Public Schools, and so they had a pretty rigorous review process and all the titles, and they used to meet as a team, all the librarians. I think one of the things that the department here lacks is it's not that big of a team, right?
Mhm.
So a lot of reflections, yes, I'm assuming may have to rely on peers and other places as well. So, but again, those would be that type of process. As much as the policy can dictate, we obviously don't want to restrict the creativity, and we hope in the professionalism of our staff, right? And the hired professionals, all of them with higher degrees, second, 2 degrees or more in the space, and I don't think maliciously or intently are going after, trying to introduce our kids to harmful material. So with that said, how much that policy can enforce the process being placed and followed, like there is, or I don't know if it was ever school committee process, but in the places I've worked, I used to go through what's called the curriculum review process, or every year, every so many years, it would get reviewed. I personally kind of thought that was every so many years is kind of too far apart, like, because it's always being reviewed, because teachers go through it and they change it all the time. So formalizing that process, I think, would be beneficial in some way, so that it doesn't need to be like the aha moment or the gotcha moment. And I would say that the school has done a lot of improvement, particularly in the libraries. That the library at the memorial, when my kids were there, some of the books that were pulled out of there were straight out of 1960s. Brought home one of Henry's friends brought home a whole book on weapons, like, it was very, very interesting. And it's because they haven't had a study librarian to weed the library. It's called weeding, to weed out stuff that it's probably never been checked out, right? Whoever, Henry Schremer is probably the first person to check it out in like 20 years. So I think that that's what the policy should ultimately do, is support that review process, right? And not to, and I'm cautious about being the policy being too rigid in restricting the instructional creativity that helps our teachers do what they do best. And at the same time, have it be often enough that we're not gonna. I mean, how many of us grew up watching movies in the '90s that probably aren't going to be aired anymore on TV, on TV. So because of their the nature of what's on them, or the language used. So I don't know, and that's what I'm hoping out of a policy that would revolve around curriculum. I think it would be more around adhering to a review process, what that review process looks like, and I think that's obviously what they've already done. Updating that review process, and then in particular, it's going to be different for the library than it is for science, right? Or maybe something more subjective, like social studies today is pretty much a very similar boat to libraries, because it's it can be culturally charged with the state of today's culture, and 10 years later it'll change again, right? Whereas science is usually always science, and math, 2 + 2 still equals 4. So now the way, so those two kind of luck out, right? They may review new curriculum on, advancing pedagogy on the delivery of those, whereas the content evolving is definitely smack dab in something like social studies and or the library. So
Okay.
it has all inclusive, kind of an all inclusive like model, right? So
I think, and I would just say, like, specifically around the books, that I don't know exactly how we can operationalize it, but as they procure or bring in new titles, in an ideal world, there are those that are fringe. Hey, this may or may not be age appropriate. It would be ideal if anytime, as those fringe ones that occurs, that at least does trigger an automatic review. I.e. goes up to Christine and or Jeff, or principal Christine or principal. I think the challenging part is how do you define fringe, right? I do think they are like a couple of these, as that was raised, we're looking at the policies and then the operating model around it. And I think that was one area that I did bring up in one of the public meetings, like, okay, how can we at least, what is the best way to monitor that? I haven't found like a silver bullet answer as to how you might monitor it yet. I do know, this is still, there's a meeting, I think, that we're going to put it on the agenda in the February meeting to, one is what's the, after our review, how do we feel about, the decision that was made? And then that's where I am curious, though. Like, I'm not quite sure, does the something ideally would trigger even with the librarian, hey, this might get us in, this might not be appropriate for everybody. One way that I think will be more publicized is parents can say, there's certain books we don't want our children to take out. It would be good to know, hey, which ones are being raised. That again, it's crowdsourced effectively, but at least it is. You can't always, like, there is that balance. They can't be, Jeff or the principals aren't always looking over their shoulder. They have to give them some latitude. So I don't know if that answers, between Leo and I don't think we're either giving you a great.
No, it's helpful. I'm just, because the point is, obviously the biggest thing was the age recommendation, so age recommendation should be a huge, deciding factor, which is why Jeff decided to take Flamer out of the middle school, because it was just above that age restriction, which, it shouldn't have. Hopefully with the new updated procedure, I believe it's a procedure, because the way Christine explained it, school committee doesn't have to vote on procedure, but you vote on policy.
correct.
So the new procedure to, do this, that's one of the line items is, age appropriateness and age recommendation, which again, like I might let my kids watch something that other parents do not. That's where it comes down to parent,
Right.
consent and decision, but again, so that was my question. Well, with the existing policy not having that line item of age recommendation, and you can't be like holding hands of everybody, but like, how did this even get in there to begin with? And hopefully moving forward, having these, more specific kind of guidelines that can be avoided in the future.
Yeah, like that to me would, like, the default is if it's 14 plus, doesn't go in the middle school. Like that's this, like, that would just be what, now would there be exceptions? Sure, maybe there's good reasons. But like something like that, that's a little more binary. Age
Yeah,
recommendation, at
and
least
then- and then-
it,
Yeah,
you know,
sorry.
no, I think I think that's, we are, I think the actual future review, like that is something that we're still waiting to hear from the administration as well. I think it sounds to me like we're on the same page.
Yes. Yeah, no, absolutely. Again, my question that I threw out there is just kind of getting that understanding of how it's going to be, I think just overseen, to make sure. And, that I think that's just going to have to be a
An administrative
wait and
process.
see and learning process with it.
Well, we fought, one of the things, like I said, curriculum was something that was on my radar, when I ran in the first place. And, I fought to get the director's position reinstated, and we had one for some time. And then I think there was a retirement, and, and it's always retirements in positions that don't sit in front of students always get targeted as savings sometimes for a while. And so getting it restored was a big part of that. And this is one of the reasons, right, is to, carry out the process, kind of be those checks and balances, and, and the effectiveness, right? I mean, aside from the books, it's, those books were barely signed out before people, were shocked by it.
That's the problem with social media. You don't miss much when they're advertised.
But like I said, my understanding was is nobody signed the books out, and then all of a sudden it became oversubscribed. Everyone wanted to sign them out. So
Well, yeah, they wanted to see what it was all about.
right, by the kids, the kids in the library, they I guess signed up and they went to the public library, I heard. But on the side, the more important part of the policy is around, the content that is being assigned and taught all the time, right? In the classroom, every student's getting, subjected to it, right? Or subjected to
Both
it.
sides, like
That's a
subjected
that's a
to
tough
both.
toward. I
Yeah.
didn't mean subjected to it. I meant, presented with this content, right? In the classroom as part of the curriculum, and I think, having an eye on those and your thumb on the pulse is extremely important, because that's the impact on, test scores and how kids are doing, and, they're building their creative skill sets, and how are they processing information, knowing that information's real and when it's not real. Information literacy is not a new concept, but it's become ever important because of social media, right? So people's
So, Liam, I'm
ability
going to play the role of also, as you wrap it up, trying to keep, as we get to folks, to keep the topics rolling as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm sorry. Yeah, 100%.
All right, thank you.
Yep. And everyone moved around on the screen, so now trying to
Yeah,
go.
there's a few more. There's another.
Yeah, I've invited them in. They declined to come in. So
Okay.
I asked the people who are just listening, if you do want to join the panel, join the panel is not like you have to speak, but if you want to be able the ability, you have to raise your hand so I can pull you in to speak. That's why I was inviting you as a panelist, but you don't necessarily have to speak, but it's a quicker option. So I'm keeping an eye on that if the hands go up. I did see Bruce put his hand up, but he's still connecting to audio, so I'm not sure how we'd hear him. So unless he's the 617 number that dialed in separate. I will try inviting, because I don't think we have chat open, right? No, I think. Oh, I can't promote the phone. Oh, I can allow it to talk. Hold on. So, hello, 617 number. Are you Bruce? 459-2100. Okay.
That's why I just moved.
All right, I will just leave that person in there and see what happens. All right, going around, Steve.
How you doing?
Good, how you doing, Steve?
I'm doing good. Thank you, guys. Thanks for doing this tonight. This is great. My question is on policy in regards to social media in Medfield accounts, like teacher accounts or department head accounts. I just want to just give you a couple examples of what I'm talking about, of kind of like what I've accumulated. Here's one. Please reach out to your healthcare providers for the facts regarding vaccines. They will share the truth and do what's best for you, not the Republican National Committee or TikTok. Here's another one. The conservative war on education that has failed. And what else here? Another one. I just filed as a candidate. This is for a congressman. I just filed as a candidate for U.S. Congress. We're going to flip Minnesota's first congressional district from red to blue. So these are actual Medfield department head Twitter accounts. So I'm not sure how these.
Are they official Medfield Twitter
Yes.
accounts?
Yes, they are. Yep. And there's multiple. Like I have a bunch of them.
Yeah.
And it seems like there's a particular bias directed one way. Like I was looking for other ones going the opposite direction, so I could just be like, you know what, this is a problem all around. But it almost seems like it's a systemic issue. And
well, I'm not going to get into a red blue conversation, but I can tell you my opinion on social media in our schools.
Sure.
I think all the teachers should get off Twitter ASAP. Yep, Twitter, and only personal accounts, no school accounts on Twitter or Facebook anymore.
So I think I personally think that these, and there's some of them post really interesting articles, or the problem is when
they can do that. They can do that on their own account. Like
no, but even so, using Twitter accounts, to show science or whatever it is fantastic. I think the problem is when you're going down a political or pushing political agendas or ideology, then it becomes extremely problematic.
Well, and like I said, that I see why they're using Twitter, and here's my reasoning for it. My reasoning mainly is because a lot of times they're posting pictures of kids and the activities in the room, and I don't want my kid out there.
Yeah,
I don't want my kid's picture out there. I don't want it on Twitter. I don't want it scanned, indexed, and everything else. Facebook too. And frankly, I think very much like the library situation and everything else, personal accounts, school accounts, it blurs the area. I think it opens up teachers, the current state of affairs, it just opens them up to too much criticism and risk. So, and we don't, obviously, if it's that's why I had to ask, like if it said, and I'm pulling this out of the air, math department, no, probably the least one you're going to see on there, math department head Medfield Twitter account tweeting the stuff you said, or is it Mr. So-and-so who's the math department head? Oh, it's Olga. Yeah.
These are actual department head accounts.
Right.
It will say, an example, it will say like Medfield Fine Arts.
Right.
And they're posting like I'm not sure what, like turning a district from one color to another has anything to do with Medfield Fine Arts.
I agree with you. So I think that
policy
right now there isn't one. And I've had personally a conversation with Dr. Marsden briefly about it. I think we're going to definitely address it. I think that the sharing of classroom activities and science experience and all that stuff, I think that should be, behind a walled garden for the parents. And if there's something in particular, we can publish that on the website because that's what it's for. And we can have a community account. Maybe we can get kind of like what the town's trying to do, but it's hard, I think that's where the web still kind of is king on the kind of like the newsletter concept of having, hey, I was doing this experiment. I'm going to send this off to the person in charge of the school newsletter, which I think right now is the principals. But that principal's newsletter, I believe, is public, and usually it's on the principal's blog or something like that. And I think that's a great spot, for that kind of activity. But the real benefit, I'm not scouring my teachers' Twitter accounts to see what's happening in the classroom, you know? And so to me, there was a movement at one point in time around it, around social media and effective and nice, trying to get a positive use out of it. But I just think it's one more, is one more thing that they kind of maybe feel like they have to do. And it's unfortunate that we're going to shift gears. So perhaps we can shift it to something different to continue maintain that same kind of communication to the learning community, which is I know what they're trying to do, and pulls them out of that particular thing. And if they want their own private account, it's part of their First Amendment right, so.
No, totally. But when they're using town accounts to almost like politicize or as
Right.
political tools, it becomes a big problem. And that's, it shows bias. And I think that's kind of something that it's a systemic issue that's kind of trickled down. And, I've heard issues in classrooms where there have been curriculum that have, Superintendent Marsden has pulled, where kids have actually like left the school for this. And it's the same thing where it's the bias and the microaggressions that have kind of permeated, and that's what we're hoping to kind of, I have 2 kids now that are in private schools, in that like any type of political discussions or conversations or tweets or social media is a huge like no, because they don't want there to be any type of division or animosity between students and staff and parents. I mean, the least we know about people's political ideology, the better off anybody is. I mean, there's really no need to know either way. And I think that's kind of, a big problem. I know I went to a Bishop Feen open house a couple months ago, and I saw, I think it was almost 13 Medfield families there. And we were talking to the principal and a couple of the families, and it seemed like this was a major issue. And just alone in our St. Catherine's carpool, we have 10 kids in our neighborhood that go to St. Catherine's. And it seems like it's just the same kind of issue where it's the same kind of problem that people are talking about, where it's just become so divisive. And we saw at the school committee meeting not too long ago, a mom got up and said she felt her daughter was vilified, for her views and religious beliefs. So like, that's like, what is our school committee doing to ensure, that this isn't occurring? And like you said, there's no policy in regards to this. How do we get that moving?
Well, you jumped onto 2 different things. So feeling persecuted in class, I mean, that's at the bottom of every statement, that we do not persecute anyone, for their religion and everything else. And the last meeting we had, there was a gigantic conversation about and the adoption of I don't think we changed it to teaching and learning vision statements, but essentially it was around consideration for everyone's past and backgrounds in the content and in the delivery of our curriculum. And so that aside, obviously, is now a voted vision statement. So outside of that, again, it goes right back down to the same procedures, right, that I mentioned to Kaylin. And then also as far as social media, I believe it's a part of a communications policy that, is probably to be shaped. And I know it's something that I want to bring up.
Yeah.
And we definitely want to talk about it. And I'm pretty open about my opinion about it. I think it's, to me, it's like teacher websites, it's another place and something else they had to do, right? They have to do it. My entire, I was the IT guy in schools, right? So I was training teachers how to build them, and they had to do it. I used to monitor traffic with Google Analytics about what parents went to, and no one ever goes to the websites. So the purpose of these accounts was to replace the website initially, right? And obviously they got into Twitter. They probably weren't into Twitter before they were said, let's go to this PD and we're going to try out Twitter as a way to communicate with our community. And I don't know how many people still use Twitter. I never really got into it, to be honest. I have an account, but never really got into it. So I never got it in the first place. So I know that you're not reaching the target population we're trying to reach, right? And so I think I know there are better solutions out there that are geared towards schools, communities, learning.
It's not the format, it's what they're putting on the format is the problem. It's not what the social media platforms, it's what they're putting on the platform.
Well, they
That's-
can, like I said, they could, but if they were using their personal account,
they're using,
that's fine.
those were all Medfield, those were
Sure,
4.
I hear you. I mean, are you recommending another type of policy about it? Like, I guess the policy would probably read something in the fact that we're not going to have official school social media accounts outside of designated ones, right? We don't want to make a policy that, names platforms, because then you're pigeonholing yourself, and those change too often, right? They change all the time. So
I think the big thing would be like, if you're going to have a policy in regards to this, like if I was able to do it and could wave a magic wand, I would just be like, hey, let's keep it education orientated. Let's keep political opinions or political articles or anything that's political, that's one side or another. Let's try to remove that and just keep it based towards academics or what we're doing in the classroom, or what science projects we're on.
remove it from the current accounts, you mean?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Like-
my recommendation would be to delete them.
Yeah.
Altogether.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's great stuff because a lot of people are obviously on Twitter. I don't follow it as much, but I get, and a lot of stuff gets sent to me, so it's kind of weird. It's interesting, but I think the biggest thing is avoid anything that's divisive. The stuff like that where it's saying we need to turn a district from red to blue or whatever it is not needed. Like it's not important. It doesn't do anything for Medfield students in Minnesota.
Okay, Tim.
No, I think I would, I want to look a little more.
I know
closely.
I stuck my stake in the ground around the whole idea of social media. So,
I think
so Tim, I don't know what your
tend to agree.
opinion is.
I think, we are doing a pretty broad policy review. One of the things that's coming up, even, and Leo and I actually are, that's an area I guess we're not really allowed to talk to. We're the committee on it. High level though, I think some of that is sequential, going through each, policy B, C, D, et cetera. I think there are a few that we might want to bring up towards the front. And in that
That was
case,
one of them.
this one to me, at least highest level, I don't know directly what is the exact policy around.
I think what I reviewed is pretty vague. It's more vague, and it's purposely vague because
more often than not, I agree though. Higher level, I'd rather see less of it. That you will occasionally see sometimes. It's going to be similar, Steve. Like I agree that there's red or blue. Like there are certain political things we know people are going to stay away from. Then you will sometimes see somebody post something after a massive school shooting or something like that. That you could still say that's politically motivated, and I just think that there is like that's
I
something.
don't think either side wants to see school shootings, Tim.
No, I understand, but I think those are areas where there's a human element that we don't want to be so overwhelming. But I put it like in the same thing. Part of this is to listen, capture some feedback, and try to continue to raise it. I think it's worthwhile to say, hey, let's look a little closer. And you're seeing it. One of the topics anyway, a couple of folks asked about the public input. We may get to that. The review process may take the better part of a year to go through the entire manual. And actually implement what the changes are. That's kind of that said, there's no reason why a policy can't come forward, quickly.
Yeah,
It has to be a priority.
And do anything with like major sweeping practice, like Twitter account, like change, right? What's a practice that's going to impact every classroom, right? And I don't know. I know they were encouraging it. I don't know how much was required. I really don't. I don't know if it was required at any one point. I think it might have been a recommendation. I think the elementaries mainly use, a newsletter in Google, to communicate out to families. And some of them, I think, do Twitter. Some of them from that effect do Twitter. But, I think the idea of, using Google to send out the newsletter, I don't think the general public cares all too much about, what science project's going on in the third grade classroom. It might be interesting to them, but at the same time, it's one thing for the teacher to have their own account and could share out, hey, I did this in my class today. And it was real, and it worked really well, right? And here's a link to my lesson plan, that might be worthwhile to a lot of folks outside of our community.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I think that's what Steve is saying, which I just want to piggyback on what Steve was saying. Like, it's not whether it's Twitter or some other, social media, it's just the political component of these tweets.
Right.
What,
Well, like,
whatever
yeah,
side it is, like, it's concerning. Like, public school is for everyone. And when you become very political, everyone doesn't feel welcome. And so regardless of whatever social media and whether you hate it, which I hate social media, but it's still there, right? And it needs to stop. Like, the political, it's not okay in
so
public
like,
school.
well, that's what I'm saying. So
So
yeah,
I
I
guess
agree.
how do we fix that?
Yes.
So I think this more immediately, we could probably ask, the superintendent to ask them not to use the school accounts, right? I mean, we can ask, it's not a policy, and we would have to go through a policy process, which, would take time, right? So you could, email Dr. Marsden about it, or the principal, with
Which
the
I have.
But if
And-
there's not a policy, then they're not official Twitter accounts because they're not monitored by the school. Is that my understanding? Like,
That's
so you're
right.
saying they're coming from official Medfield departments, but they're technically not. They're just teachers or staff who have like named it that and own it. So
They named
I'm
it,
not
right?
saying it's
So they
right or
could
wrong.
rename
allowed
I'm
it.
just
to.
saying.
Yeah.
They're allowed to because Twitter lets them, because
Well, I
it's
think
like
they were.
it's like the wild, wild west over there. Like, I don't trust anything.
Yeah. Well, Claire, I think they were encouraged to in the past, like
Yeah.
Okay.
years ago. There was like a time here when there was a lot of progressive pedagogical shift happening and adoption of technology.
Yeah, because like
I
I only downloaded Twitter because that's where Dr. Marsden posts if we're gonna have a snow day. He's literally like one of 3 people I follow because I don't understand
Right.
Twitter. I don't use Twitter. I don't know anything about it. But I like my understanding is that there's not, except for Dr. Marsden's account and like Medfield Public Schools, like there's not any official sanctioned
Yeah,
accounts.
all the sports teams
Maybe
have
yeah, but like
yeah.
Well,
So
the
I-
departments do. So if you,
departments.
I just think it's concerning that they are labeling it as a school,
Account. I
like
agree. It
named
shouldn't
it,
be-
named
Yeah, I
it as
agree.
a school one, and then
Yeah.
sharing all school information on it, right? It's not like pictures of their kids. It's
Right.
all school stuff. So I guess that needs to be
Well,
clear.
if they changed, and so what I mean, to Claire's point, if they change the name from something department head, I don't remember which one you said, Steve, but whatever department head, Medfield, right, to whatever their name is, just change the name, right? And they can put in their bio what they do. I mean, we can't. So they're on LinkedIn. They're on LinkedIn doing
Yeah,
that.
I
they're on
mean, I'm
Facebook.
hearing, don't use the platform that you have, you are a department head within the Medfield Public Schools to try to promote something that, is your bias. It's something that,
Right.
That's-
Right.
politically
name it.
stirred.
Don't name the account. I mean, I know what he's
Yeah,
saying.
yeah,
but
but-
name the account, Medfield Science Department
Yeah.
Twitter account. And then, but if it changed to, I don't know who the science department head is, but if you change the science department, if you change it to their name and scrub the Medfield out of it, except maybe they can put their title. I don't know if people do that. That's more of a LinkedIn thing. But, like to Claire's point, it's social media and they can put whatever they want on there.
Yeah,
as long-
absolutely, for a personal account, but they're sharing all school sanctioned events and activities,
Can't
and
stop them from that either.
so
They could
you
retweet.
can't-
They could retweet it out too.
Yeah, so.
so I think there needs to be some kind of policy, right? So that you're not.
I mean, if they're tweeting, I mean, if they've got their name, and they happen to be in that position, and they're tweeting out stuff that they're doing in their classroom, and they're tweeting out, stuff they're doing in the classroom, and they're tweeting out, red or blue rhetoric. They're still public information. It's not like they're tweeting out someone's social security number, and that's their opinion. I haven't seen a public school district. I mean, I think that someone else brought this up with me too, and I was like, it sounds like a serious First Amendment case if we were to say you can't go on Twitter.
It's not saying you can't go on Twitter, but when it's labeled Blake LMC, right?
That part I give you.
And
Yep.
then it's sharing what's in the library every day. That looks like an official Twitter. And I think there could be a policy where you can say you can't label
Right.
your account Blake LMC and tweet everything that has to do with schools and then say, oh, but these are my personal thoughts,
Right.
right? And protect yourself,
I think,
right? Like, it
like again, I
doesn't-
think that's a way of, and I think that's a way of, good. Go ahead, Nicole, sorry.
No, oh no, I'm saying 1 second to
Oh,
Deb, my daughter.
I agree with you.
Sorry.
Like I said, I agree with you. I think it leaves things way too open, right? Because who's to stop? And this has happened. I personally had to work with the FBI on this. Someone spoofed an email account and was tweeting out as our, not tweeting out, they were emailing threats to folks from an assistant superintendent in one of the districts I worked with, and it was sending them to the White House, right? And all, because someone made up an account, right? And someone can go in and create a new account, right? Many of you know this well, tons of accounts on these platforms because it's endless, they're not curated. There's no true one person, right? And they can be someone else that name can be gotten rid of and someone else can go take it and say, this is what's happening, even though it's not happening, right? So I think officially for the protection of our staff, for the protection of, information about our kids, I think we should just kind of eliminate it as official, any kind of official platform for the school district. Except maybe if Dr. Marsden wants to do, school closings and sports, and maybe the sports accounts, like sports teams, to share out for the folks who are doing that. But keep it strictly, we can have them put a procedure together. Part of the policy will be to have a procedure, right? For those folks to use those accounts for that. And then that kind of eliminates the problem. And then outside of that, and each teacher can do whatever they want. It's their First Amendment right, to go and does it look good sometimes? It depends on the community you're in, right? That's the crux. There's all kinds of stuff in the news. You've seen what's happened to teachers in other parts of the country. So,
well, that's the thing. When we're trying to make an all-inclusive environment where everybody's safe and looking through it through multiple lenses, why wouldn't we want to be as neutral as possible, no matter what? That's the kind of like the point.
Because what was the word? Sorry.
Trying to be inclusive, looking through
Yeah.
multiple lenses, and you want to make every classroom feel like a safe place for students.
Right.
When they go on there and see a department head saying, don't listen to the Republican National Committee, like that was an exact word, and their parents could be, or maybe they feel that way, and then they don't feel safe in that classroom anymore. We also have to take into account these kids' feelings as well, and what they're dealing with, and the emotional trauma that's how that impacts them as well.
Yeah, I don't want my kids on Twitter for as long as possible. I would keep them
Well,
off there,
it's not- I'm talking about our Medfield department heads that are putting these out, that parents and kids are seeing, because then it creates
I
animosity.
understand what you're saying. Steve, you're saying, hey, if you disagree, that should be their right, and maybe it comes up, but they may be fearful of sharing that based on so I have a better understanding of what you're saying. I think a lot of it, I think, Leo, you are recognizing there are ways to get around it.
There's lots of risk, right? There's just lots of risk.
But try to, for
Yeah.
town-owned accounts, don't use them. And try to, and it could be a policy that says, don't use your title or your, the role that you have as a platform to advocate positions like that. And within reason, I think we can at least,
We can train them on best practices for sure, right?
yeah, there are things where, you at least study it. There's another topic that I think is gradually coming up again, and that's mobile devices in the high school. And for a while, it seemed like, hey, it might make a good idea to not necessarily have them in the classrooms. And as we studied
It's
it
not out.
more,
It definitely should not be out. Kids are abusing it.
yeah, I have an opinion on it, but as you studied it more and more, there was at least, people said, hey, here's some examples and reasons why you might. To at least, and then you start to realize, hey, this is at least something that there's going to be a little bit of debate before you can do it. But right now, what we've talked about, Steve, to me, it seemed fairly common sense. Like, okay, so what's the counter position? If we did that, I use the term, it's too simple. What bad things happen if you have that in place? Nothing jumps off the page of me. And I would say, hey, yeah, it's a worthwhile question. Right? Like, hey, how are other districts handling this around social media? And is there a relatively, at least let's put some controls. Is there some controls we can put in there?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I don't want to take up your time because I know other
Right.
people. Thank you.
Franklin has a really, really good policy on social media for its staff. That might be one to look at. And one of the points that it makes in its policy is that if any of the staff members are actually talking about their capacity in any capacity with their job, whether it's on social media or elsewhere, that they are actually not protected by First Amendment rights if it can reflect poorly on the district and their professional status. So it's just really an interesting point.
We have to run that one by legal because
Yeah, exactly.
that's pretty bold, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've actually seen it on some of the union documents. So I'm surrounded by teachers on our street, and there's been a lot of articles written about First Amendment rights.
I would imagine that's probably a big union hot button.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just something to consider. That
would mean don't put it on LinkedIn either, right? Right.
Well, I think it just is if what they're saying is viewed detrimental to the district. It
define detrimental, right? I don't know.
Exactly.
I understand. It's always going to be hard to say, hey, but at least you have a baseline.
Yep.
Right. Like, and so
Glassdoor.com is all about ranking your employer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll have that policy in a matter of minutes. I'll fire off an email. I know the Franklin folks well, so
yeah, it's an interesting read.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Chris, no one else is raising their hand, and Mr. Bardsley has been in and out, and I think he's having connection issues. And one more reminder to the people in the waiting room: if you'd like to speak, I just have to promote you to a panelist. Well, actually, no, I can allow you to talk if you don't want to show your face, but it'd be better if you could see your face. So.
My big question has to do with the school committee role with regard to curriculum adoption in general. And I'm not even thinking about the book issue. I'm thinking about the math pilot right now. I went to the Memorial Site Council meeting, and I learned a lot. I mean, a lot of facts about the pilot I did not realize. And I think the big one was I had assumed that it was just only one curriculum example or sample that they were going to be piloting, and found out it was actually 3 different ones, and the extent of who was going to be involved in that and how long it was going to take. I actually sent Christine Power a bunch of very specific questions, figuring she was the expert on this, and I know she's working on some answers. But it did really kind of made a question jump out to me about school committee's role when you have a pilot program, because when you think about the amount of time, effort that the staff is going to be putting into adopting or examining 3 different potential math, curriculums, and then also, what was wrong with the current one, and what are we hoping to achieve? What is the extent of the curriculum review for math? There were just a lot of questions that I just thought it would have been really helpful as an informational item, even if school committee didn't have any authority over the pilot, but it would have been very helpful to have it be an agenda item, just to go through all the basics. It's going to be a pretty big project. It's going to involve a lot of people. I also wondered how much it cost. Like, do you get free samples from these companies to pilot, or do you pay a fee for this? And I think one of the main sort of reasons that I got interested in this was sitting on the elementary school day committee when we were looking at the extension of the day. And at that point in time, when we had just rolled out the Envision math, hearing teachers talking about how much time and effort it took to adopt new curriculum. So it was just very sort of sensitive to their role in all this. So, but it's mostly, for me, it's about the school committee role when these pilots get proposed.
So, again, that's part of the curriculum process, and piloting curriculum has to be done in order for it to be, to see whether it's effective. The particular program that was used in the past was called Envisions Math. And my understanding of the history of at least the elementary curriculum, that it was in dire need of some revamp, some time ago. I mean, this was over a decade ago, maybe. And that Dr. Marston, I believe, led that charge with the folks when he came, and, having something organized, buying a program, if you will, in this case, at the time it was Envisions Math, which was a Pearson product at the time, which I think they've kind of abandoned because of not meeting the needs. And again, that's out of a fact of, or a process where classroom teachers saw that it wasn't meeting students' needs, and immediately shifted in a different direction. So, and worked as a team to do that. I am not familiar intimately with what this particular program is and what grade levels it covers. My only hope, and again, from my professional side of things, I just hope it builds continuity, that builds year over year, right? Whatever it is, so that, that when students progress up the grade levels, that the teachers pick up what the kids left off the previous year and continue on, and that there's collaboration in that fact. Now, to answer your question about piloting, hopefully that they probably did a major pilot after reviewing many others. That's generally how the process works. It's generally a team kind of pulls together, and whether it's a grade level team or a high school team, it depends on who it is. Like, I think people know my wife teaches in a neighboring district, and she's part of a sophomore history team. And if there's a curriculum change to be made there, they pool together and they figure out that curriculum. A lot of times it's homegrown. So to your cost question, I'm not sure what they're using. They could be using an open source project. There's a couple of really highly impactful open source products. There is a great website that measures, they consider it the consumer reports for curriculum. It's called Ed Reports. And it's foundation funded, but the folks at Ed Reports are where a lot of the state agencies across the country use to, and large school districts use to kind of look at some of the impact of some of the product lines out there. Obviously, they haven't reviewed all of them, but they've reviewed quite a few. And in the math particular, there is, the name of it's escaping me, but there is a couple of open source ones that are highly impactful. And they become open source because they're built and funded, through foundation funds. And so therefore they're free, and then they can be adjusted. But again, I'm not familiar in particular with this particular pilot over this particular case and what they're using and what they're venturing in and what problem they're trying to solve.
So, and that's why I asked the question, because I just feel like as school committee members, you guys should have a baseline information about this pilot. I mean, I'm looking at the curriculum adoption policy, and it says committee wishes to be informed of all new courses and substantive revisions in curriculum. It will receive reports on changes under consideration. So, I mean, I'm just thinking as a baseline, you guys should know what grades are impacted. You should know how many people are on the involved with reviewing it. You should have a general idea of the three that are being considered. One I know is open source. I don't have my notes in front of me from the meeting, but I did look after the meeting, and I saw that one was open source. The other two are not. School committee should know what the cost of the pack, of each one is for just a budget, comparison. I'm just saying.
Chris, I know where you're going with this, and it's totally. I know your opinion. It's very, I get it. We're doing a terrible job across the board.
But it's about
but I'll say,
Leo, it's about process.
We won't know the price until it's doled out, right? I don't know when the implementation might be for this. I'm assuming it'll be in the budget. If it's an increase in the budget, around that particular line item, I know that hopefully we're not paying for Envisions anymore because that was very expensive. So probably enough money left over to help balance it. No, all joking aside, as my opinion on it is, that's pretty granular to, being aware of the pilot. Yes, sure. Obviously knowing what grade levels, cool, but once they've got their plan fleshed out, I'd much rather hear the plan, what the process was to get to the plan, and, yeah, what the cost is going to be, of course, and what the outcomes are going to be, right? And what the implementation is going to be, how much retooling of teachers and how we're going to pay for that, right? And we're going to do it over the summer. What's the impact on shifting all the grade levels, you know, that are needed? So I'm more worried about less about micromanaging the process of getting there, but I want to know that there was a process. I want to know what the process is going to solve, because I had to do this in my own departments. So even as a department head, you know, with 65 people and I had 3 different teams, you know, K to 12, you know, I couldn't actually know. I knew reviews were going on and I would get periodic updates, but as far as going up to the superintendent, he just wanted to know that it was happening, you know, and why we were doing it, and then making sure the principals were on board, because the principals are the ones that, you know, run the building, and making sure that they're up to speed on, you know, what we're doing and why we're doing it.
So I just also just want to make it clear, I'm not trying to be argumentative on this. When I, as a communications person, the most effective communication is proactive. So
Sure.
when you have something like a pilot, a big pilot that's going to affect a lot of people, it's going to affect teachers, it's going to affect the kids who are using it, you know, it's going to affect the budget. It's, you know, or you have, you know, the banned book thing comes up every year. It's just a good idea to kind of try and anticipate these things, be proactive with communication, try and think about what are the questions or the concerns or the information that people may be asking about, and just try and get ahead of it a little bit. As from a communication standpoint, it's less about the tactics, and it's more about the strategy of thinking ahead to what people's questions are going to be in advance. That's the reason I bring this up. It's not to be argumentative. It's just that all of a sudden you're hearing about all these math pilots, and I have the reference point of hearing what the teachers had said in the past. So it just brought up a lot of questions for me. Like, I just think it would be helpful to know in advance before these things get rolled out, and not a lot of detail, just, you know, 5 bullet points. You know, here's when it's going to start, who's going to be involved, here's our criteria, you know, whatever. That's all.
Yeah, I was just looking at some of my notes, and this goes back a while. So it's not unusual. I just see, like, in October, this would have been October 21, math pilot, ID2 that we were piloting, reveal and illustrative math.
Illustrative math. Yep, that's the one.
Recommendations to the committee to follow.
Yep.
Like, I'm just saying, I think it's not, it's something that at least that they have typically, at least that will come up. I would defer more to Leo in some of the areas like curriculum. I think it's not necessarily my area of strength.
And illustrative math was the one I was thinking of, actually.
Yeah, like large.
And actually remember being pleased that they were looking at that, because we implemented it in one of my schools. Yeah,
procedurally, though, you know, I think in general, Dr. Marston does know if there's something that's going to have real impact across the schools or, you know, the staff, it does come forward. But I don't know enough about the extent of this pilot. You know, it's not that unusual that you hear about it the year before. This is something we're going to go a year later. I don't think that's exactly the same one. I'm just saying that, you know, there was discussion then about a math pilot that, you know, like, I think we will hear and there.
Well, I also think too, just one last point is that because we haven't had a presentation on MCAS results, to look at the actual math assessment, and to say, well, we're doing this pilot because we're seeing that maybe we might be able to close the gap in X, Y, and Z. You know, we don't have that basis. We don't have the MCAS sort of presentation that we usually get to sort of have a better understanding of what this curriculum may be able to help with, you know.
Yeah, I think there's other, I mean, the MCAS, there is some other, like, we're getting back to normalcy post-pandemic.
We've always had a presentation.
Yeah, I'd rather not talk about MCAS as a barometer. I asked, she gave us presentation of the benchmark assessments, and that's much better. Yeah. Well, I care about learning. So, you know, and MCAS doesn't reflect
on those. Where's the presentation on on our assessments?
I asked one, I got one in the fall, I'm pretty sure. So I asked one, and they did it, and we got this year's coming, right? So we're only in end of the second quarter, so it's coming up. You need at least 2 to measure growth, right, each year. So I did I think it's STAR. I think we're using STAR here, which is a Renaissance product. So, and as long as it's something, you know, to measure progress. And more importantly, it's not just measure progress, it's to capture the ones in need. You know, the one, you know, to make sure that we catch folks up or provide support that's needed. And that's what those benchmark assessments are for. So, and if it's systemic, right? If you see a large dip across everybody, then you know it's a focus area. So, and that's why we hire the professionals to do that. Does anybody else on the call have any idea, any comments or thoughts on this particular subject around math pilots? Okay. No one wants to cross subject lines.
But I think it's also, you know, it's, we hear you. I think we are trying to move in a direction, Chris, you've seen it, at least, you know, site council, make sure it has the voice that it needs to have. You know, by bringing them into our meetings, trying to be more structured where we are looking at their improvement plans. We do plan on, you know, asking them to come back to school committee. You know, I'm just saying that some of those, we at least do have that forum. The fact that you came to the meeting, you heard about it, that gave you the opportunity to then reach out to Dr. Powers. Like, I think those are, at least it's a starting point. I'm not patting ourselves on the back and saying we're doing great. I'm saying at least it did give you, all right, good, I'm glad we're aware. We have to, you know, I just don't know enough about that pilot. It's worth saying, okay, what's the extent of it? Which we can look into. I think I'm not sure if there's any other.
Yeah, is anybody in the audience? There's some people in here, there's some people added. Again, if you just came and you want to talk, you're welcome to join. I'll promote you all as a panelist, or if you'd like to ask a question. Anyone? I can ask to promote you too. You can always decline if you want to.
Yeah, I don't see anyone raising hands.
Yeah, I'll try it one more time and see if people want to. People may have walked away too. So no one knew. Anything else that wasn't part of the? I mean, I think it was good. Good to have the questions on there, but we're not limited to the questions, of course. Quick question too on this. Did everyone get the email? I mean, the link to this just from my email tonight? Or was it posted somewhere?
Yes, I got an email like right before it started and used that.
Okay.
Use that link. That was super helpful. Because it was also somewhere else. Was it in the response? I forget.
It was in the patch article too.
Yeah, it's been places, but I just used the email you sent. That was helpful, so I didn't have to dig for it.
Okay.
As I was like trying to finish dinner dishes and log in quickly.
Totally get it. I'm just curious for, you know, for future sessions, how people really got it. Because I just assumed it was in the response, but depending when you set up, I sent it out because Kaylin sent an email looking for it, and I said, well, maybe everybody didn't get it, so that's why I sent it out. So, okay, well, if no one has anything else, anything?
Thanks for doing this. Seriously, I'm glad you guys did it. It's great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good to have some good topics. I definitely walked away with notes on each one of the topics.
Yeah,
it's helpful to hear it in a forum that you just talk a little more to understand it, which we did, and it was worthwhile. Like I think we're trying to do a few of these, and I think it, you know, to me, we wanted to do at least one personal and one with Zoom. Maybe, you know, maybe there'll be two more before one or two before the year's out. This is one that Michelle has driven a little more of than us, but yeah, I think thank you folks for joining, and you know, appreciate the input. It definitely helps.
Awesome.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
See ya.
Thank you.